Those of you who have been here before know that this is how we start off the classes. So sit comfortably. I'll turn off my fan. And I have the lawn fellow move. He's chopping up the grass. So I've asked him to move so we don't hear that sound. So sit comfortably. Relax your body and mind. And place your attention on the respiration. And once you've recognized it, continue with the mental factor of mindfulness. Be mindful of your breathing. To the exclusion of every other thought. Especially just when the breath is changing direction from an inhalation to an exhalation or vice versa. That's a time when you might be tempted to multitask. Some other thoughts come into your mind, but focus even there. Just watch that exact point when it's changing direction. Then when the mind is a little bit calmed, follow one inhalation up your nostrils as though it's going to the crown of your head, down the two side channels to the heart chakra area. Put your attention there. Withdraw your attention away from the other senses, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and tactile consciousnesses. Just watch your mental consciousness. Don't be distracted by a color, like maybe darkness if your eyes are partially closed, or light. The mind has no color, no shape. There might be colorful mental images within it. Try to see the spaciousness between the thoughts. And even when the thoughts are present, using their very presence to induce an understanding of the clarity of the mind. They couldn't be there unless the mind lacked obstructing contact, obstruction. The mind doesn't hinder thoughts from arising. It doesn't prevent them from absorbing back into the consciousness. This is what's called the conventional clear light nature of the mind. That we have continually, whether we focus on it or not. And when we do focus on it, recognizing it as the conventional Buddha nature, or the conventional, what's called developmental Buddha nature, the ability to develop virtuous states of mind, dharmic states of mind, exalted wisdom, gnosis. And it also indicates that we can get rid of all of our faulty states of mind, even things that we think are ingrained, our habitual patterns, our conceptions of ourself. Our ability to recognize that right now is due to the fortuitous situation now of having a life of leisure and endowment as a human in a religious country, or a country that allows the practice of spirituality. The Buddha's teachings still exist. The Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma, and it still is vibrant, existing. There are individuals with realizations of it as our companions and teachers. We have the opportunity of using this life not merely to accumulate wealth or to feel good, to have as many pleasurable experiences as we can and so forth. We have the opportunity to use it to finally get out of cyclic existence within which we have been enmeshed since beginning this time, and within which all other migrating beings still caught in samsara, who've been our mothers numberless times, they are also caught. We have the opportunity of making realizations to help them, and directly by giving advice and teachings to inspire them to act in the same way we are in the practice of Dharma, and to achieve enlightenment eventually with this clear light nature of the mind, transforming it into the Buddha's omniscient mind, the Dharmakaya, the wisdom Dharmakaya. To do that, we need to know about the mind, about this laboratory within which we're doing these great experiments to develop compassion and renunciation and wisdom and patience and empathy. So with that overall goal of achieving enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings, thinking in particular, I'm going to participate this morning in the class on mind and mental factors in order to well understand my mind, even if I've heard this before, to be able to recognize the various factors of the mind, its qualities and so forth, with the goal of using that to be able to control my mind, develop realizations to benefit all sentient beings, especially to achieve enlightenment for their benefit. I'm going to listen and participate this morning in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So then relax your mind, come back to the present, so to speak. And good morning, a couple others, Karen, Anna, David, Ida. Nice to see you all. And we have a couple of new, Mark and Lewis have joined us. Mark is in Aptos. Lewis, where did you say you were, Lewis? You were in?
Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Oh, Florida, yeah. Florida. Okay, I hope you're inoculated. I heard things are pretty heavy in Florida.
Very inoculated.
Good, excellent. Okay, so good to see all of you. We have a really exciting, subject to be going over. Some of you may have heard teachings before. How many have heard discourse on mind and mental factors before? Okay, couple. So some of you, David, you have not, right? Okay, maybe
probably have.
Probably have, if you don't remember. Okay. So the text we have, and I assume you all have the PDF of the translation, right? Translated by a very nice, very smart Singapore lady, CG. What is she? Has it? To CG. I think in Chinese, the family name comes first, so we always call her CG. And this is a text by Ganchen Yeshe Gelsen, who was one of the great Tibetan expositors. And he's drawing his definitions from what's called the lower and the upper Abhidharmas. Do you know what that means? Who can say, what's the lower Abhidharma? Anyone know? Stephen's thinking. Anyone have an idea? So when we say the lower and upper Abhidharmas, so usually the two main texts that are considered Abhidharma are the text by Vasubandhu called the Abhidharma Kosha. Have you guys heard of that? We've mentioned it in some of our other classes. Lewis, have you heard of that? Abhidharma Kosha? No. That was a text written by Vasubandhu from the point of view of the Sautrantika system, criticizing the Vaibhashika, the lowest of the Hinayana schools, and from the point of view of the upper of the Hinayana school. So it's called the lower Abhidharma because it's talking about the Abhidharma from the point of view of the two Hinayana tenet schools that we usually recognize. Okay. Then the upper Abhidharma is considered to be the text, the Abhidharma Samuchaya, which was written by Vasubandhu's brother, Asanga. And Asanga was converted to the Mahayana at an early age, and he wrote the Abhidharma Samuchaya to explain the same kind of subjects of Abhidharma from the Mahayana point of view. Yeah, there are many stories about these two brothers. So the Ganchen Yeshe Gelsen. Kachen. You know what Kachen means? That's a title. Anyone know? Ka means difficult. Chen means great. So that's a title that's given, especially not only in Gelugpa, but sometimes in Kagyu and Nyingma traditions, for someone who studied the difficult texts. Ka Chen, difficult, Chen means great. So that sometimes 10 great difficult texts. Usually in the Gelugpa tradition, people who have this kind of study are called geshes, Gewe Shenyan, which means spiritual friend. But there are other kinds of titles that are equivalent. So Kachen Yeshe Gelsen. So he modeled his definitions, as we'll see, mainly from these two Abhidharma texts. So I'm going to begin with the introduction and go over that a little bit because it's kind of a nice preparation. If you have the text, I don't know if you have more than one screen you can look at, if you can have the text on one screen or if you printed it out. I prostrate and go for refuge at all times to the feet or at the feet of the holy venerable Guru, who is the inseparable from the protector Manjughosha. Please always take care of me with your great mercy. So generally when texts are written by Tibetans, especially commentaries about something, there is a homage at the beginning to create the karma to be able to complete the text, to create the karma to do that. He says, you, having completed the two collections through the force of, here it says exalted compassion. I think it's in Tibetan, it's referential compassion. That means a compassion that's joined with the wisdom of emptiness. You have completed the two collections. Do you know the two collections? Ida, do you know what the two collections are? No? Mark, you're
wisdom and merit.
The collection of wisdom and the collection of merit, right? The collection of merit, the usual karma that we collect, that brings about, that's the main cause of achieving the form bodies of a Buddha when we achieve that. And of course, the merit is what, the ripening of which gives us favorable conditions, is a source of realizations and so forth. Doris, you have an observation? Oh, I thought you were.
Sorry, I was signaling to Anna that we're on page 5.
Oh, okay, 5. I think, okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at a different text. That's not the number. Anybody provide that for me?
This is page 7.
Page 7, and what is the first page? What's the title of the text?
The title of the text is A Necklace for Those of Clear Awareness, Clearly Revealing the Modes of Minds and Mental Factors.
Thank you. I've got that somewhere. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. So it says by Yeshe Gelsen, but usually they put an honorific title before it, Kachen. So he's an expert in the 10 difficult texts. So you have completed the two collections through the force of exalted compassion. You've eliminated obscuring darkness, and you know all phenomena, clarifying what you yourself have seen for migrating beings. I bow down to the unsurpassed refuge, Lord Muni. So this verse is not talking about the Guru any longer, it's talking about Shakyamuni Buddha. You've heard the word Muni, right? When we talk about Shakyamuni, Muni means able or, sage, you could say. So this is, just stating that the author recognizes and bows down to Shakyamuni Buddha's omniscient mind. Shakyamuni Buddha passed away, but his omniscient mind continues, and we can still call that the omniscient mind of Shakyamuni Buddha, even though there's not an individual living called that. Then the next one is a homage to Maitreya and well, let's say, due to your earnest, single-pointed love for migrating beings, you are renowned as protector Maitri. So Maitri, the loving protector. So usually what we call Maitreya, the loving one. So that's the future Buddha, right? To the regent of the conqueror, the protector Ajita, I pay homage with a mind of heartfelt respect. So the regent means in Tushita heaven, Maitreya, the future Maitreya Buddha who will appear in the world, already is an omniscient being, taking the aspect of a 10th level Bodhisattva. And so he's the regent there. Then to you who have been predicted by the Sugata himself. Sugata is another epithet of the Buddha, right? One who has gone to bliss. We say, gets translated into English. You have been predicted by the Sugata himself. You've clarified the excellent systems of the profound and extensive, and are greatly renowned as the great trailblazers. I prostrate to the 6 ornaments and the 2 supremes of Jambu Dipa. You know what Jambu Dipa means?
Isn't that another name for India or the southern continent?
Right. It's the name of the southern continent, which in sometimes it's identified with India because it's sort of south of, what's north of it. But and some reason to think that might be the origin, but it also generally refers to this world, Jambudvipa. The southern continent is said to have a blue sky, and most of the world has a blue sky. So it's considered to be the world. So what this is talking about the great trailblazers. So when we talk about the two trailblazers, or the 2 supremes here, it's talking about well, here it says the 6 ornaments are the ornament of the middle way, Nargajuna and Aryadeva. So they are the 2 ornaments that explained the Majjhimika. The ornaments of knowledge, Asanga and Vasubandhu, who we just talked about, that means these 2 Abhidharmas, and the ornaments of valid cognition, Dignaga and Dharmakirti. That's maybe some of you might have an easy way of remembering those now because we've run across them again and again. We haven't talked so much about Aryadeva. Aryadeva was one of the was the principal disciple of Nargajuna. The 6 ornaments and the 2 supremes here are called Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha, who were scholars of Vinaya, the discipline, the laws of discipline and so forth. So it says, in this land surrounded by, you have been predicted by the Sugata himself, clarified the excellent systems of the profound and extensive, and are greatly renowned as the great trailblazers. Sometimes we talk about the trailblazers as being Nargajuna and Asanga, right? You know that? Because what did Nargajuna blaze the trail of? He's reopened the understanding of the Majjhimaka, and Asanga sort of opened the trail, understanding the Yogacara or Chittamatra, the mind only, sort of the 2 Mahayana main philosophies. Then in this land surrounded by snow mountains, usually that means Tibet, right? even though if you live in Boulder or someplace, you may be surrounded by snow mountains. In this land surrounded by snow mountains, you caused the grove of the 1,000-petaled lotuses of the sutras, tantras, and their commentaries to bloom anew, and are worthy of praise equal to the sun, the conqueror. I bow down to Lama Protector Manjughosha. So this is referring to Lama Tsongkhapa himself, who's considered to be an emanation of Manjushri. Manjughosha is another name for Manjushri, right? Merely seeing the light rays of your exalted activities, the eye of awareness, seeing the excellent path is illuminated. May the venerable Guru, the light of the day-making sun, always abide at the lotus stamens of my heart. So here thinking of, praise to one's root guru, who one certainly from the tantric point of view, one tries to see as a Buddha, even from the sutra, the Mahayana and the Hinayana Sutra traditions, one tries to see as an exemplar of the Buddha. Although others will not benefit from a discourse by one such as me, and I can definitely say that about myself, more than Yeshe Gelsen could say about himself, although others will not benefit from a discourse by one such as me, for the sake of enhancing my mind's familiarity with the excellent explanations, and due to having been exhorted by others, implored, requested by others, I shall write a little on the modes of mind and mental factors in accordance with the texts on Abhidharma, on knowledge. Okay, so that's his creation of merit is in accordance with the lamas of the past, the gurus of the past, in writing a text to eliminate obstacles, to create favorable conditions, and also sort of a promise to compose the text, because spiritual beings don't make promises lightly. They say that the promises of the rishis, the great ascetics and realized beings, are like having carved something on stone, unlike the promises of ourselves, which is like dusting our finger on the beach in the sand, which is easily blown away by the winds, and so forth. So that kind of promise is something that they try to complete. Then the text continues, intelligent beings, hopefully ourselves, we might consider ourselves intelligent. Here, intelligent beings might have something even more specific in mind in terms of beings who have tried to open the eye of awareness. Intelligent beings who have in mind their welfare in future lives. Some people that at least have a sense of renunciation, not simply focused on the happiness of this life, not being content simply with acquiring food and clothing for the duration of this life, who think, what will become of me in future rebirths? Those kind of individuals should wonder, I have circled powerlessly in the three realms of cyclic existence since beginningless time, continuously experiencing suffering. Does this sound like a motivation you've heard many times when the Dalai Lama and other lamas give, very, very powerful when you begin in the morning, just to think about that. I've been in cyclic existence since beginningless time, never having full control, always being buffeted by the winds of karma and the imprints of my delusions, my afflictions, my klesha, creating more causes, never getting out. I've circled powerlessly, that means without my own, real guidance. I've been under the influence of karma and delusion in the three realms of samsara since beginningless time, continuously experiencing suffering. What? Really? No pleasure? Of course. there's samsaric pleasure, but samsaric pleasure, as we've learned, is considered from the Buddhist point of view. Contaminated pleasure is the nature of suffering. So even when we've had chocolate pudding and ice cream, that's the nature of suffering. What is the root of this? That's what one should think. Having contemplated in this manner, you must come to understand that these sufferings of cyclic existence neither arise without cause, just randomly, nor arise from discordant cause, some cause that's unrelated to them. Rather, they arise from their own causes, actions and afflictions. Actions, we can translate as karma, afflictions, delusions, karma and delusions, actions and afflictions. Those are the, when we talk about the Four Noble Truths, what's the second noble truth? The origin of suffering? What is the origin of suffering in just two words?
Ignorance. Well,
Ignorance is one word.
Rude delusions.
Rude delusions, two words, but it's not. No. Karma and klesha.
Oh,
Karma means action.
that's three words.
Well, karma klesha. Okay, two words. Very good. Keep me on my toes there. So karma and klesha are the causes of suffering. The immediate causes, karma. That's what's ripening and gives rise to our sufferings. Even our contaminated pleasures is the ripening of contaminated karma, which is the nature of suffering. So we say that's the direct cause. The indirect cause, or the fundamental cause of our suffering, is that which creates karma, our afflictions. The afflicted, the 6 root delusions, the 20 secondary delusions, many of which create negative karma. And as I mentioned before, not all afflictions are definitely negative, right? Can you think of a delusion which doesn't necessarily create negative karma? Shanka can't. He said, Mark, do you think?
Ignorance.
One kind of ignorance that was self-grasping or grasping at true existence is present even when we create virtuous karma. So it is not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily create negative karma. Okay. So what is the root of this? Having contemplated in this way, you must come to understand that these sufferings of cyclic existence neither arise without cause, just randomly, nor arise from discordant causes that really don't have anything to do with them. Rather, they arise from their own causes, karma and klesha. The protector Nagarjuna says in his precious garland, as long as the aggregates are misconceived, this is kind of similar to Mark's and Shanka's answer of what the root is. As long as the aggregates are misconceived, there will be the conception of an I or a self. When there is conception of an I meaning capital I, the letter I, not EYE. When there is conception of an I, there is also action. Due to that, there is rebirth. So this is very concise. So what's saying is that as long as you have a grasping at the inherent existence of the aggregates, that's what it means when it says the aggregates are misconceived. As long as you conceive as the aggregates to be inherently existent, you will have a grasping to the self, the I, as being inherently existent. It means in a conception of a self. We can have a conception of the self as being merely imputed, but that's not what's referred to here. When it says there will be a conception of an I, it means this wrong conception of the I. The reason for saying that is that, in some of the Hinayana schools, it says that it's not necessary to realize the emptiness of phenomena. It's just necessary to realize the selflessness of the person, the I. So here it's saying that you'll still have, even you think you've realized the selflessness of the person, if you still grasp at the aggregates and other phenomena as inherently existent, you haven't really eliminated the selfless, you haven't really eliminated grasping to the selflessness. You've eliminated a grosser version of that. That's kind of the implication of this. As long as the aggregates are misconceived, there will be conception of an I. And when you have that kind of grasping to the inherent existence of the self, the conception of an I, there is necessarily the creation of contaminated actions. Due to that, you'll have rebirth. You create karma to be reborn, and you remain in cyclic existence. And then his treatise, that is Nagarjuna's treatise on the middle way, the famous text that His Holiness has begun teaching many times. If you have a chance to listen to his discourses on YouTube or the DalaiLama.com on the fundamental wisdom is another way that it's called, fundamental wisdom, or the treatise on the middle way. There he says in chapter 26, verse 10, the root of cyclic existence is compositional actions. Compositional actions, is that the same as actions? Do you know, Anna? Have you heard the term compositional actions?
Sorry, it was in a daydream. No, I haven't.
Okay,
Sorry.
good. I woke you from your daydream. Okay.
Do you know, I was thinking how lucky we are. The Dalai Lama has given these teachings on you. I was just thinking, wow.
Yeah.
So sorry, that was my
Okay.
daydream.
Okay, so you can check. So the two main places I check, maybe someone else has other ideas, is YouTube and also DalaiLama.com. It's easy to remember. DalaiLama.com.
Is compositional actions. Compositional actions.
Okay, someone is saying.
Could it be because all our actions are compounded with afflictions, so they're not pure actions, so they're compositional?
You could maybe, maybe think of it that way. What are you thinking, Shankar?
That's actually the direction I was going.
Okay, so they compose actions. When we talk about the 12 links, what's the first link?
Ignorance.
Ignorance, right? What's the second link?
Contact.
No. If it comes, that is one of the links, but not the second link.
Karmic formations.
Yeah, so you could translate here compositional actions as karmic formations. So that means like a potter doing his or her work, forming pots, the karma creates the forms or composes the imprints that will lead to rebirth in cyclic existence. Shankar, yeah.
Oh, on a totally different topic, since you mentioned Dalai Lama's teaching on the Madhyamika text, just wanted to mention for those of you who might be interested in this class, at Shravasti Abbey, there's a very well-known Geshe from Sarah J, who's teaching on the Pramana, or as Venerable says, and also there's another one on the Madhyamika Anyway, one of the Madhyamika texts. I'm getting tongue-tied here, but anyway, yeah. So there you go.
Okay, Shravasti Abbey, you can look them up on the web and go to their website.
Yeah.
Okay, so here this quotation says, the root of cyclic existence is compositional action. So karmic formations, another way of saying that, right? Therefore, the second link, therefore the wise do not create compositional actions. They don't create karmic formations. Hence, the unwise, as opposed to the wise, are creators. You know, they create karmic actions that lead to rebirth and cyclic existence. The wise are not creators because of seeing thusness. Thusness is one of the many synonyms of emptiness, right? Thusness, the way things are, they are thus. Then Acharya Aryadeva. Oh, Mark, you have a question. Yeah. You have to unmute.
Can you just go over the karmic formations again? Is it like an activation of a karmic imprint?
No, that would come later. Karmic formations is when you are creating the karma, which you're forming the karma by your action.
So it's the action of body, speech, and mind?
Yes.
Under the influence of ignorance.
Under the influence of ignorance, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Aryadeva, here it says Acharya Aryadeva, says in his treatise of the 400 stanzas. So this is a text that's, very, very good. That, one of the main texts that His Holiness teaches about emptiness. He's taught, were you there, Nadine, when he taught in Germany some years ago? Aryadeva?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 2007 in Hamburg.
Yeah, I was there too.
Yes.
Hamburg.
Wow.
have a Hamburg later. So Aryadeva says, the consciousness that is the seed of cyclic existence, or here it just says existence, meaning cyclic existence, as its objects of activity, as its sphere, you could say, objects of activity. Chuyul is what is usually in Tibetan means the objects, objects of activity. Usually we translate that as sphere. And I can't remember right now, when we talk about cows in India, the cow has a certain area that it eats the grass in. That's its sphere, right? Sphere of activity. You can think of it like that. And in fact, the Sanskrit of sphere has to do with the root word for cow. Hence, the unwise are creators, the wise are not. So Aryadeva says, the consciousness that is the seed of cyclic existence has objects as its sphere. That's what it understands. Arya Chandrakirti says in his Majjhimakavatara, here they translate it supplement to the middle way, the very diverse worlds of sentient beings and their environments are established by the mind itself. It is taught that all migrating beings, without exception, are born from actions, born from karma, as a result of karma, right? You don't just create an action and then suddenly a sentient being appears, you just snap your fingers. It's not like that. It means that the actions that you create within your continuum, leaving an imprint, which will impel you into another rebirth. So this is similar to the famous statement in the Abhidharmakosha, which is on the next page. Acharya Vasubandhu says in his Abhidharmakosha, the various worlds are produced from actions. Usually it says the translation, usually, I'm not sure if she's got the whole quote there, maybe. Usually we say the world and the inhabitants therein are created by karma. So we are the creators of the world. Our collective karma creates the environment that we all experience, and our own experiences of that are due to our individual karmic seeds, our individual actions. And then also from Abhidharma Kosha says, the root of cyclic existence is the 6 subtle increasers. Have you heard that expression before? Ida, you haven't heard that? I'm saying, who's heard of the 6 subtle increasers? Someone has. Bob, what are the 6 subtle increasers?
Yeah, I've heard the term, but I can't quite remember. Is that the same thing as the afflictions? I can't.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe, or
yeah.
the proclivities
Yeah.
also be the.
Right, the 6 root delusions. So in the Abhidharma, they're called the 6 subtle increasers. Many such statements have been taught. Likewise, Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charyavatara says, the propounder of the truth has taught. So who's the propounder of the truth? It means the Buddha. That in this way, all fears and the immeasurable sufferings arise from the mind. So the mind is our main laboratory that we have to work on to eliminate our sufferings and to develop wisdom and so forth. Also says in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, those who do not understand the secret of the mind, the great objective of the Dharma, wander aimlessly, even though they wish to attain happiness and destroy suffering. Therefore, I should hold well and guard well this mind of mine, my mind. I should hold this and guard well. So in order to be able to do that, that's why we're studying the mind and mental factors now, okay? And then again, physical suffering and mental unhappiness, the various kinds of fears, as well as separation from what one desires, arise from committing misdeeds. Does it make sense? Negative karma gives rise to physical suffering, mental unhappiness, which is physical suffering, mental suffering, and the various kinds of fear. I remember, I think I told this story once, when I was walking from the library in Dharamsala down to, or walking up to the library from Dharamsala, I passed by the veranda of a Indian house, and I was smiling, the people were smiling, but the little baby that they were holding saw me and started crying. They was afraid. You know, even those kinds of fears that we have sometimes, something happens, have arisen from our negative karmas. Our virtuous karmas, by performing virtues intended in the mind, wherever I go, due to those merits, I shall be honored with the excellences that are their results. So when we talk about virtuous karma, as we'll see, virtuous karma can either be contaminated or uncontaminated, right? Do you know what that means, Karen? Contaminated virtue?
Well, probably most of the virtue that we in, at least in our ordinary lives, is contaminated, right? We give money, but maybe we don't expect something in return, but we think somebody will appreciate it or honor us or something.
That's one aspect of it. But even with pure motivation, if you still have ego grasping, that's the contamination here. And as you say, worldly people, giving to the Red Cross to see your name on the list and so forth, you might think that you've created a lot of merit. It's kind of what's called striped karma, right? You do create some virtue by making offering, but it's contaminated and it's striped with the sort of warped motivation. Here, when you get rid of all of the wrong motivations, if you still have grasping to true existence, that's still called contaminated virtue. And that will arise as just one strand, just white karma, that will arise as pleasure in cyclic existence, but that will keep you in cyclic existence. It won't get you out of cyclic existence. So by performing virtues intended in the mind, wherever I go due to those merits, I will be honored with the excellences that are their results.
The hearts of vast, fragrant and cool lotuses, the nourishment of the conquerors, pleasant.
Oh, it started I must have pressed some button here to my text. My iPad began reading. I found some section there, started reading what it said. Okay. Although one who commits misdeeds wishes for happiness, wherever he goes, those misdeeds will completely destroy him with the weapons of suffering. So that brings to mind the famous verse, I think in, I'm not sure, Arya Deva, talking about the individuals that want to have happiness. We want to have happiness, but we don't know what the causes of happiness are. And the things we do to find happiness actually create negative karma. You know, we accumulate money, we maybe cheat a little bit to get more money so that we'll be happy. And, you know, as Lama Yeshe used to say, they means well, dear. They means well, they mean well. People mean well, they want to be happy, they want to be free of suffering, but they create the causes of unhappiness, thinking they're creating the causes of happiness because we create misdeeds. As a result of virtue, the spiritual children of the Sugatas, so remember that one of the epithets of the Bodhisattvas are the children of the Buddha, the sons of the Buddha, the children of the Buddha. Here the Sugatas, same thing, refers to the Bodhisattvas. As a result of virtue, the Bodhisattvas come to dwell in the hearts of vast, fragrant, and cool lotuses. The nourishment of the conquerors' pleasant speech causes their splendor to increase. Their supreme bodies emerge from lotuses that unfold due to the light of the munis, and they abide in the presence of the conquerors. What's that talking about? It's just like poetry or what? Stephen, you have an idea. Oh, Doris, you have an idea. I can't hear you, Stephen.
Being born in the Pure Lands, I think.
Sounds like being born in Pure Lands with spontaneous rebirth from, not as spontaneous, but born from lotus, right? You know, Padmasambhava is said to be the lotus-born one. It's said that he was born and emerged from a lotus. The result of non-virtues, as a result of many non-virtues, my condition will be wretched due to my skin being ripped off by the henchmen of Yama. Who's Yama? Is that some guy in Southern California or what?
The Lord of Death.
A Lord of Death. Yama is the Lord of Death. So this refers to the henchmen of Yama, means that karmically, what we perceive as beings in the hell, when we're in the hell realm, some people might be ripping off our skin or plunging us into molten copper pools as we struggle to get a breath and so forth. They're not actually beings down there. Those so-called henchmen of Yama are actually our karmic projections, but we experience that kind of fear and suffering there. Molten copper melted by the tremendous heat will be poured into my body, pierced by flaming swords and daggers. My flesh will be cut into hundreds of pieces, and I shall plummet upon the fiercely blazing iron ground. Doesn't sound so good, right? So this is just kind of introductory verses to motivate us to study mind and mental factors. So just as was said above, all of cyclic existence, the vessel world, the environment, and the inhabitants therein, all of them arise through the force of their own causes, actions, and afflictions. So that's good to remember. The second noble truth the origin of suffering. What's the origin of suffering? As Shankar reminded me, 3 words: karma and afflictions, karma and klesha, or you could just say 2 words, karma klesha. Understanding it's not one thing, there's 2 things. This has been taught not just once, but again and again in the sutras and tantras, as well as their commentaries. Likewise, it has been taught that all the excellent qualities of the paths and grounds. What is the paths and grounds? You know, one of the texts that we study are called Salam, grounds and paths.
So the five paths and the 10 grounds and for the Bodhisattvas?
Yeah, you could say that. So even in the Hinayana, we talk about the grounds of the hearers, and the Pratika Buddhists. It has slightly different sort of levels there, but the 5 paths. Do you know what the 5 paths are? Ida, do you know what the 5 paths are? You have to unmute somewhere. Oh, there.
Okay. Is it accumulation, purification, path of seeing? And I can't remember the rest.
Okay, so path of accumulation or collection, where one, like Edward Kahn says, like a warrior's accumulating the armor necessary to go into battle. Path of preparation or connection. The word in Sanskrit and Tibetan can be translated both ways. Often we call it preparation, meaning preparing to realize emptiness directly, or connecting to the path of seeing. That's the second path. Those are paths before one becomes an Arya being, before one's realized emptiness directly. The path of accumulation, the path of preparation. Both of them are preceded by the generation of bodhicitta for the Bodhisattva path, right? Or in the Hinayana path, they have the same names of the paths. That's preceded by spontaneous renunciation. So once you have either renunciation or spontaneous bodhicitta, you enter the path of accumulation. Eventually, when you investigate emptiness and try to develop single-pointed concentration and penetrative insight, you have a path of preparation. Once you have a direct realization of emptiness, you're on the path of seeing, directly cognizing emptiness. And when you re-enter meditation on emptiness, you enter into the path of meditation, meditating on what was already seen on the path of seeing, enhancing your understanding, eliminating the delusions. And at the very end of the path of meditation, when all of the delusions have been abandoned, you enter into you graduate, you enter into the path of no more learning. So no more learning is synonymous with the fruit of either arhatship or Buddhahood on those 2 paths. So we say path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, path of no more learning. I joke, graduation, you know, you're no longer a student.
So Venerable?
Yeah.
So in the Hinayana, the arhatship is at the end of the path of, at the no more learning, but in the Mahayana, it's the path of seeing where it's arhatship, right? Am I correct?
No, you're not correct. The first part was correct.
Okay.
The path of seeing is, what did you think the path of seeing is? Path of no more learning?
Well, I know you're a superior being, Arya being, when you get to the path of seeing, right?
Yes.
But isn't that the same as arhatship or no?
No.
Okay.
It's not the same as arhatship. So you still, you still have to eliminate all of the afflictions from the mind. Seeing emptiness on the path of seeing, one eliminates what are called the intellectually formed delusions, things that come about because of your own preconceptions. You haven't eliminated any of the innate afflictions on the path of seeing. On the path of meditation, you eliminate all of the innate afflictions, And on the Bodhisattva path, when you enter into the 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis, what are called the pure bhumis,
Right.
you have, upon finishing the 7th bhumi in the meditative equipoise, at that point, you eliminate all of the afflictions, and entering into the 8th bhumi, you could be called a Mahayana Arhat at that time,
Right, that's right.
because all of the afflictions are completely removed.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So good refresher for some of you. Just as has been said, all of cyclic existence, the inhabitants, the environment and the inhabitants arise through the force of their causes, actions, and afflictions. This has been taught not just once, but again and again, guys, in the sutras and tantras, as well as their commentaries. Likewise, it has been taught that all the excellent qualities of the paths and grounds of the 3 vehicles meaning what? Chevrolet, Ford, no, what? What are the 3 vehicles? Stephen?
Your solitary realizer and bodhisattva vehicles.
So 2 kinds of Hinayana practitioners, the hearers, the Shravakas, and the Pratyeka Buddhas, the solitary realizers, and the vehicle of the Bodhisattvas. Those are called the 3 vehicles. Sometimes people don't know that. That's interesting. You didn't know that, right? Doris, you knew that? You know. So all of the excellent qualities of the paths and grounds of the 3 vehicles.
I missed it. What was it?
Not muted.
Oh, sorry. 3 vehicles. Hearers, solitary realizers, and Bodhisattva vehicle. They arise solely from their own causes. Wholesome, virtuous minds. All of the qualities come about because of having wholesome, virtuous minds. Therefore, the root of all cyclic existence and nirvana is established to be the mind itself. So not only the root of cyclic existence is the mind, if you talk about it in a general way, sometimes we say the root of cyclic existence is ignorance, or the view of the transitory collection, sort of the grasping to a self of persons. But here we're talking about root, meaning, just in general, the mind is the root of everything that's good and bad that we experience. How the mind acts then determines whether we suffer or we have these wonderful, amazing qualities of the grounds and paths leading to Buddhahood and so forth. Hence, it is of utmost importance to understand the modes of minds and mental factors. So minds, usually in Tibetan, mind is sem. Do you know what that is in Sanskrit? Shankar knows. Chitta, like bodhicitta, right? Chitta. In Tibetan, mental factors, what we translate as mental factors is semjong. What is that in Sanskrit? Does anyone know? Bob, you know?
Mental factors?
That's not Sanskrit, that's English. Yeah, what is
okay.
mental factors in Sanskrit? Bob, you know? Kaitas, right? So chitta and chaita are mind and mental factors. We'll come across that again. That's what we're going to be talking about. Hence, it is of utmost importance to understand the modes of minds and mental factors. Thus, here I shall compose a brief presentation on minds and mental factors. There are 2 parts: the individual entities and divisions of mind and mental factors, and then a summary of the salient points in their application to practice that will come at the end. So we're diving into the actual meat of the text now, or the tofu of the text, if you're vegan or whatever. So first the explanation of mind, then later the explanation of mental factors. So explanation of minds. Regarding the difference between a mind, sem, or chitta, and a mental factor, chaita. Those are two different things, right? In Maitreya's Madhyanta Vibhagna, discrimination of the middle and extremes, this is one of the first texts that Lama Yeshe had us study. For many, many years at Kopa, we always studied Lanrim, Lanrim, Lanrim. Every year, people say, oh, next year we teach about emptiness, and Lama Zopa would again teach Lanrim. Finally, Lama taught for the first time Madhyanta Vibhagna. Madhyanta, Mad means middle, Anta means extreme, Vibhagna means analysis or discrimination. Discrimination of the middle way from that which is, on the extreme versions of that. And this was mainly from the Chittamatra point of view. And when Lama began to teach that, everyone was so excited. The first lecture on emptiness, that Lama was going to be giving, Lama Yeshe was giving. And there was, just when Lama began, some fellow in the audience said, Lama, I have a question. And everyone was cringing, like this was like the Amara coming to disturb the first presentation of emptiness. And Lama Yeshe just said, oh dear, he spoke to him for a few seconds and diffused the worry, the fear that arose in our mind that it was going to become an obstacle. It's kind of like the Buddha under the Bodhi tree with all of the Maras coming to try to disturb. So this is from the Madhyanta Vibhagna. That which sees an object is a primary consciousness. That's that which sees its attributes or attribute is a mental factor. So this definition is very famed. One could say this is a definition for meditation. So primary mind or primary consciousness is a quality of all of our consciousness. All of our consciousness has two qualities. All of the same substance, you might say, the consciousness that's knowing. One aspect of it is its nature as being a primary consciousness that knows the mere entity of the perceptual field. Here it says that sees an object. That's primary consciousness. The mental factors are the qualities of that same consciousness that engage individual attributes of the perceptual field. So say an eye consciousness, primary eye consciousness doesn't discriminate the colors. It just has a mere apprehension of the perceptual field. That's the primary consciousness. The mental factors within that, like discrimination, discriminates the colors and shapes. The feeling has an experience of the perceptual field and so forth. Then so that's a quotation from Madhyanta Vibhagna. And Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge, the Abhidharma Kosha, says, primary consciousness knows individually. So the individually can be understood to mean the various individual senses. Just as has been said above, that which knows the mere entity of the object. Well, it wasn't, here it says, just as has been said. It didn't say the mere entity in the quotation from Madhyanta Vibhagna, but he's saying that's what's meant. The mere entity of the object or the perceptual field, right, is called mind. That means primary consciousness. When we say mind, in the distinction between mind and mental factors, mind means primary consciousness. That which, taking the observation of that very object as its basis, engages the object by means of the isolates of other attributes. Those of you who didn't study earlier courses is what is this isolates? We could leave that out for the time being, saying engages the object in terms of its other attributes, such as its function and so forth, is called a mental factor. So when I see with my eye consciousness, the primary eye consciousness and the mental factors are simultaneous. They're part of the same entity or substance of consciousness, of eye consciousness. And the primary consciousness is just that which is defined as knowing the mere perceptual field, just the mere entity of the object. The discrimination is in the eye consciousness, is one of the mental factors that we'll talk about soon. That is what's able to differentiate, say, for instance, I'm looking at the window, there's a window frame, there's an edge. Discrimination, which is the factor that can that engages those different kinds of shapes and so forth, and colors and so forth. So there are different kinds of mental factors that have different functions. Just as has been said above, that which knows the mere entity of an object is called mind. That which, taking observation of that very object as its basis, engages the object by means of isolates of other attributes, such as function, is called a mental factor. I'll come back to that later. It is just as has been said by the omniscient Gyaltsab. Who's the omniscient Gyaltsab? Anyone know?
Gyaltsab J, Gendundrup J, Gyaltsab J.
Yeah, that's what you're going to say, right, Bob? Gyaltsab J, two main disciples of Lama Tsongkhapa. In the tanka above me. Oh, yeah. So let me see. I have something long enough to lead up to that. So they're below Lama Tsongkhapa. You see Lama Tsongkhapa above in the middle there? Right there. And then below there's another Lama Tsongkhapa with two disciples, one on either side of him. Those are Gyaltsab J and Gendundrup J.
And Gendundrup J is always the angry, whatever aspect.
Yeah, kind of like me. Yeah, often he's portrayed with bigger eyes, and the debater. He was a little bit younger than Gyaltsab. Gyaltsab was the first throne holder after Lama Tsongkhapa because he was older. And so here it says the omniscient Gyaltsab, so kind of giving credence to what he's saying, right? If he's omniscient. In his essence of the ocean of knowledge, an explanation of the compendium of knowledge, he says, a main mind, that means primary consciousness, right? Such as a sense consciousness apprehending form, is explained to know individually its object. Just so, such a main mind or primary consciousness does not depend on ascertaining consciousness being produced. Rather, it distinguishes by merely observing form. So we're talking about eye consciousness. What are the objects of eye consciousness? Shape and color, right? Shape and color are what eye consciousness perceives. So here it is merely observing form without making any differentiation, as though if you were be able to center into the primary consciousness, it itself doesn't distinguish the shapes or shades of color and so forth. That's done by the mental factors that are present along with it. Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, when it says no individually, is that focusing on, does individually just mean sort of one, see just one single object sort of vaguely, as opposed to seeing all the various many aspects? So is that individuals maybe one versus many? Is that the idea of the individual?
I was thinking that it meant individual consciousnesses, but here it says a main mind such as a sense consciousness apprehending form. So that's talking about I consciousness is explained to know individually. So when we say so-so rikpa, that's knowing individually. So-so means individually. So-so means individual, individually is so-so rikpa. That sometimes it just means philosophically, when you talk about this kind of language, it means that it's its own individual experience. So it's a little bit hard to get that flavor from that sense of know individually. It's sort of like an individual, its own unique, maybe we could say unique experience. Just
Honorable?
so, go on.
I thought, or my understanding from maybe it's wrong from previous classes, was that it implies the uncommon empowering condition.
So Rikpa.
The individual, the individual experience or whatever, because each consciousness has to be by the power of its own uncommon condition, right?
So this is what I had said previously when I said that when it said what was it said earlier before it said it here. Those mirrors, yeah. What I was saying was that it in the general definition. Yeah, Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge, primary consciousness knows individually. So I was saying there that it referred to the different individual senses, which would be in accord with what you were also saying there. Okay, but
sorry.
But here, when it's saying a main mind, such as a sense consciousness apprehending form, so that's now it's just dealing with I consciousness, right? Well, it depends. If it's saying, if it's talking about visual form, it's talking about I consciousness. If it's talking about all of the sense consciousnesses apprehend their own forms. You know, they're all, the objects of them are form, meaning substance. I consciousness, when you talk about form, you're talking about visual form. So it's unclear whether it's talking about here I consciousness or just consciousnesses in general. So they're explained to know individually their own particular sphere of knowing. Just so such a main mind or primary consciousness does not depend on ascertaining consciousness being produced. What is an ascertaining consciousness? Do you remember?
It's one that produces a remembering consciousness, right?
So ascertaining consciousness in general refers to conceptual mind, having seen something or heard something or smelled something, taste something. One develops a conceptual understanding of that, which is able to then induce memory that you've seen that. That has to be here. Just so such a main mind does not depend on an ascertaining consciousness being produced. It doesn't, here we're not talking about conception being necessary. Rather, it is distinguished by merely observing form. One should know the mental factors in its retinue. So what does that mean by retinue? You know what a retinue of a king is, or the retinue of Beyonce? Is that the name of the singer, Beyonce? Who's in her retinue, you know? Or who's in the retinue of Trump? You know, they're all of this, the people that are subsidiary to him. When we talk about a king and their retinue, the retinue, the implication when we use it here in Mind and Mental Factors, the retinue is that which always accompanies the main party. So the main mind is like the king, and the retinue are like the mental factors that are always, you know, always accompany, when Bruce Springsteen goes on the stage with his, the retinue along with him, right? One should know the mental factors in its retinue. So that means a main mind has a retinue of mental factors. Not all mental factors will be present with any main mind, but there will always be at least 5, what are called the omnipresent mental factors in its retinue. If it's understanding the object that it's perceiving, there'll be an additional 5 called the object ascertaining mental factors. If it's virtuous, there will be 1 or more of the virtuous mental factors. If it's a negative state of mind, there will be some of the afflictions and so forth. So one should know the mental factors in its retinue the retinue of a main mind by way of each of their various functions. So the functions of the individual mental factors, such as having taken that observation of form as the basis, moving the mind toward it. So that would be the mental, do you know which mental factor that would be? Those of you studied mental factors before, maybe we haven't talked.
Could you repeat that again, please?
What is the mental factor that moves the mind toward it?
Action.
Action, you think?
Attraction.
Attraction. No, not necessarily. So here it's the mental, it's the omnipresent mental factor, intention, sempa, that moves the mind toward the general object. So this is such as, that's one particular function of the mental factors. Each of their various attributes, such as forgetfulness of an object that has been previously realized. So how does that work in the sentence? One should know the mental factors in its retinue by way of each of their various functions and by way of each of their various attributes. So that means their particular nature. So non-forgetfulness of an object is, non-forgetfulness is a particular mental factor. Therefore, a main mind is a knower, right? Primary, so main mind means primary consciousness, is a knower distinguished by mere observation of the object itself and does not need to be posited in terms of the other attributes. It doesn't have to be posited in terms of apprehending green or shape or color or anything like that if you talk about eye consciousness. A mental factor is a knower that, having taken the observation of that very object as its basis, so the main mind is knowing that just the mere perceptual field of the object. The mental factor is a knower that, taking observation of that very object as its basis, engages the object by means of the isolates of other attributes, such as the outcome of its function. I find that a little bit difficult to understand how she's translated that there. I'll have to look back at the Tibetan to see what she's saying there. Generally we say the main mind perceives the mere perceptual fields. It's just sort of like, it's all one mind, one consciousness, let's say eye consciousness. When we talk about the primary mental consciousness, that's its quality of just knowing the mere perceptual field. The mental factors within that eye consciousness are that which engage in the individual attributes of the perceptual field, and that they have their own particular functions, like not forgetting or so forth. So then there's a qualm. Are the mind and mental factors one entity or different entities? What do you think? Doris, what do you think? Well, you were saying one. They're one entity. I thought you were saying you knew the answer. Okay. So as we mentioned when we talked about tenets, mind and mental factors are the same entity, they're the same substance. It's not as though you can take the mind one place and you move the mental factors somewhere else. They're one in the same thing. They're one in the same substance. Like the blue of lapis lazuli, right? You can't separate the blue of lapis lazuli and the lapis lazuli somewhere else. Mark, you look like you're not. Can you take the blue out of lapis lazuli? Separate it?
No.
Oh, you're just saying that because you think that's the right answer.
Well, it just seems like these things are happening like simultaneously, like to the ordinary mind.
Yeah.
Like using my coffee mug, like the primary consciousness sees the shape of the mug, and the mental factors are the things that I impute onto the mug, like its handle and its color.
No.
And the things that are in it.
No, so the main mind doesn't even, you could say it may observe the perceptual field, which includes the cup. Okay, whatever the eye, let's say we're talking about the main primary visual consciousness, primary visual consciousness, sees the perceptual field. It doesn't necessarily limit it to that cup, whatever is impinging upon the eye consciousness. The mental factors would move the attention, the mental factor attention to the cup or to an aspect of the cup. The mental factor of discrimination or discernment would be able to discern the shape and so forth of it. The mental factor feeling would have some experiential response to that in the eye consciousness. Generally, feeling and eye consciousness is something very, very, we'll talk about this later, very difficult to experience. If you see something beautiful, if you see a beautiful painting or something like that, is that beauty that you experience, is that a feeling in the eye consciousness, Bob? No?
No, the feeling is only a sense of positive, negative, or neutral. It's not specific feelings like joy or happiness or things like that.
Right. But say if you see something beautiful, that can induce something pleasurable, right? Like we see our mind will be attracted to something that's beautiful, right? Is that the feeling that's experienced in eye consciousness?
No, I think that's a follow-up. That'll eventually be a mental conception that follows the original one.
There is something in eye consciousness, maybe the soothing feeling when you see something like a color that is soothing to the eye consciousness, but it's not the same as seeing something that's beautiful and thinking, oh, that's beautiful, and deciding to look at it longer because it's intellectually interesting, not like that. Are mind and mental factors one entity or different entities? Response from the Abhidharma Kosha again, the mind and its mental factors are definitely simultaneous. Here is the question was, are they one entity or different entities? And the answer says they are definitely simultaneous. Does that answer the question? David, you don't think that answers the question? The question was, are they one entity? So if they were different entities, they wouldn't necessarily have to be simultaneous. I guess that's the point. If they're simultaneous all the time, they are one entity. Okay. Shanka?
Is that going back to the definition of being of two things being of the same nature, that they arise and disintegrate together, like they never exist?
Right, they're never separate. They're always present at the same time. So they're
Isn't that the definition also of being of the same nature? That's what I'm asking.
well, same nature, same entity mean the same
Okay,
thing.
all right, that's okay. Yeah.
So just as been said above, a main mind and its mental factors, so say mind and mental factors, primary consciousness and mental factors arise together and simultaneously. They are simultaneous. Not being different entities, not being different natures, they are the same entity. Moreover, the two, primary consciousness and mental factors, main mind and mental factors in its retinue, are said to be one entity and concomitant by way of 5 types of similarity. Nadine, you've heard this before?
Yes, but I could not explain. Sorry.
Okay. Just I think some of you have heard. Skylar, you've never heard this before, I bet, right? 5 similarities. 5 similarities. So here it said, moreover, the two, a main mind and the mental factors in its retinue. That's important to say because let's say a main I consciousness, there are mental factors in our mental consciousness at the same time, but they are not in the retinue of the I consciousness. What do you think, Lewis? Does it make sense? I consciousness has its own retinue of mental factors that are one entity with it. Other consciousnesses and the mental consciousness have their own retinue of mental factors that are concomitant. Concomitant, you know what that means? Along with.
Yeah. And that would also imply that there must be some mental factors that are shared amongst all of them.
You think so? That's not the implication, my experience.
Oh.
Is there some mental factor that's shared between all of them?
Well, wouldn't the mental factors that are always present, the omnipresent mental factors, wouldn't they be used by all?
No, that's not the meaning of omnipresent here. Omnipresent, and we're coming to that. Omnipresent means they're always present in the retinue of a primary consciousness. A particular, so omnipresent one, there are omnipresent mental factors in the I consciousness, in the retinue of the I consciousness, those in the ear and the nose, tongue, and mental consciousness, but they don't necessarily, it doesn't mean they're simultaneous to all of them.
Okay,
well, it'll come. So not being different entities, they are the same entity. Moreover, the two, main mind and mental factors in its retinue, are said to be one entity and concomitant by way of 5 types of similarity. Stephen, before I continue, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Venerable George. Yeah, I was just still thinking about your response to Lewis's statement. And so we would have, like, say, for example, a visual consciousness and a mental consciousness happening at the same time in our mind. And they would both have the omnipresent mental factor of feeling going on, because that's the definition of omnipresent. They always have that in their retinue.
Right.
But are we saying then that, for example, the I consciousness could have, say, a negative mental factor of feeling while the...
Yeah. So say, for instance, you saw something, and so the way that feeling manifests in the I consciousness is something very subtle. Ear consciousness is a little more gross, but not much. Say, for instance, an ear feeling, a displeasurable, unpleasant feeling in the ear consciousness. Like, say, for instance, if someone says, "You're a jerk," your mental consciousness, having thought about that, may feel uncomfortable. right? But the sound "you are a jerk" doesn't necessarily cause unpleasant feeling in the ear consciousness. One of the examples of that might be you were to take your fingernails on a blackboard. What is that called? Is it? Yeah, something.
Misophonia, and I have it. When you say the word BLACKBOARD, I automatically react.
Ah,
Yeah, sorry.
misophonia. Did you call? What was it called?
Misophonia.
Misophonia. Okay, so that's kind of an example of the ear consciousness. Your mental consciousness may respond to that also with an unpleasant feeling. But say, for instance, you can have different feelings. Like, say, for instance, when you experience suffering in the body, being being bitten by a bee, your mental consciousness can actually respond with a happy feeling, thinking, "Oh, my negative karma is being used up."
Thank you, Venerable George.
I was just looking at faces to see anyone. So when it says the mind and mental factors are simultaneous, that means that the mental factors in its retinue. Okay. So 5 types of similarity between mind and mental factors. So what does that mean? And there's a difference between the upper and lower abhidharmas, as we'll see in a minute here, what these 5 similarities are. Moreover, the 2, a main mind and mental factors, there's one entity. Hence, it is incorrect to assert that minds and mental factors are not similar in time and that they are different entities, as well as it's incorrect to posit that their observed objects are separate. So the objects that they are engaging are the same. Their field is the same. They are simultaneous and they are one entity. But we'll see these 5 particulars, 5 similarities in a moment. Generally, it's said that there are 2 main definitions of mind and mental factors. The one that we just went over earlier, that the primary consciousness knows the mere entity, and the mental factors engage its particularities or in their own functions. That's one definition. The other definition is that a primary mind is that which bears 5 similarities with its concomitant mental factors, and the mental factors are those that share 5 similarities with the primary consciousness. So when we're talking about they share similarities with each other and the main consciousness. What are the similarities? Well, they have the same object, they have the same duration, they have the same entity, and so forth. This is what's meant by similar. It's not like the meaning of similarity is something different than that. To explain this clearly, when the mindfulness of an object, okay, mindfulness is a mental factor, right? When we did our meditation at the beginning, I said, first, pay attention to your breathing. And once you've recognized the breathing, then you can have mindfulness of that. Mindfulness is keeping in mind that particular object, which has already been recognized. So when the mindfulness of an object, for instance, a form, is produced, if a mindfulness of the form, the mind, the primary mind, and the mindfulness in its retinue are similar in observing the object form. Nevertheless, they are posited differently. That is, primary mind and the mindfulness are still differentiable. They're recognizable somehow as being different, even though they're the same entity. Like, say, the brown of the table is not of my table right here. You can't see my wooden table, is not separable from the table. Okay, you might try to think of some mental gymnastics that you could put some stripping substance on it, and with a spatula take off the brown color or something like that and separate, but that's not the case here. To explain this clearly, when mindfulness of an object, for instance, a form is produced, the mind, that means primary mind, and the mindfulness in its retinue are similar in observing the object form. Nevertheless, they are posited separately. The knower of the mere entity of the object form is called primary consciousness, is called mind, sem. So sem and so-sem, so means primary. They are synonymous here. Sem, or mind, and primary mind, they are synonymous. Okay, even though it sounds like if you say mind and primary mind, it might be different. It is not the case that they have separate entities like a pillar and a vase, pillar and a pot. When we learned in Tenet's class, classic examples of two things, two diverse things, a pillar and a pot. So it is not as though the primary consciousness can be separated from its mental factors like a pillar and a pot can be separated. They are the same entity. These modes have been set forth in accordance with how it has been taught in Gyaltsabje's Essence of the Ocean of Knowledge. Then Gendundrup's Ornament of Reasoning, which is the next text, it was another text on pramana by, who is Gendundrup? Anyone know? No one knows? You know, Doris, who is Gendundrup?
First Dalai Lama, I think.
I think it was the first or second Dalai Lama, one of the first Dalai Lamas. So he wrote, the first Dalai Lama was not called Dalai Lama at the time, right? You know this story, we talked about it before. So, but he had the name Gendundrup. He was one of the disciples of Lama Tsongkhapa, along with Gyaltsabje and Kedrupje. They were like very important disciples. So he wrote commentaries on many of the texts, as did Gyaltsabje and Kedrupje. So his texts are also considered to be very authoritative. So Gendundrup's Ornament of Reasoning, the great treatise on valid cognition, explains the following. The definition of a main mind is that which is concomitant by way of the 5 similarities with the mental factors in its retinue. Again, so the mental factors that are in the retinue of ear consciousness don't necessarily bear similarities with the retinue and the eye consciousness. The ear is hearing something else completely. Its mental factors are paying attention to sounds. So they're obviously not the same as the mental factors in the eye consciousness. The definition of a mental factor is that which is concomitant by way of 5 similarities with its main mind. I said, so these two definitions, the one that's for meditators, you might say, more suitable, makes sense from this point of meditation, is from the Madhyanta Vibhagna that said, the main mind is that which knows the mere entity of the object. The mental factors is that which engages in its particularities with its own particular functions. That's sort of makes sense from an experiential meditative point of view, but that's hard to hold in debate. So this other definition here, by means of 5 similarities, is said to be the more sustainable definition in debate, more technical definition. They should be the same, right? If something exists, generally it has one definition in one tenet system, one system of looking at it. But still within that, You can have some definitions that are posited from the point of view of experience and meditation, like the one from Madhyanta Vibhagna, or one that's more suitable from the point of view of debate and philosophical analysis. So this is not just Gendundrup's definition. This is just quoting him because it's a clear presentation here. The definition of primary consciousness is that which is concomitant by way of 5 similarities with its mental factors. The definition of a mental factor is that which you could say bears 5 similarities with its concomitant main mind. You could put the word concomitant in another place. Concomitant means coming together. Regarding the modes of these 5 similarities, there are 2 explanations. So from the lower Abhidharma, from the Abhidharma Kosha, and from the upper Abhidharma, which is the Abhidharma of the Mahayana, written by Asanga, the Abhidharma Samachaya. So Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha says they have a similar support. So what does that mean, similar support? The mind and primary, let's say I consciousness and its mental factors have similar support. What does that mean? What does the support refer to? Well, actually, if you read a little further there, it says sense of mental factor is also supported by that sense power upon which the mind is supported. Their supports are similar. So when we talk about support, here we're talking about the faculty. The primary I consciousness has as its support the I faculty, the I organ. The mental factors in its retinue also depend upon that same support. You might say that's common sense, but when we talk about divine I and so forth, you've heard of divine I, sort of a kind of clairvoyance. It can have a different kind of support than the I organ. Anyway, that's out of the way. So when we talk in Abhidharma Kosha, we talk about they have the same support. That means the same faculty that that supports their generation. They have similar objects of observation. So that means in Tibetan, that's mikpa. That means that's the general object that they're looking at. Like I said before, in answer to Lewis's response to Lewis, or to Mark when he held up his mug. It's not that the mug is the object of observation. The object of observation is what the eye is, the general perceptual field. The third similarity is similar subjective aspect. Go on, yeah, Shankar.
So is object of observation here synonymous with object of engagement or the object of mode of apprehension?
Not necessarily. Say, for instance, when you are let's say, for instance, you observe the 5 aggregates. That would be the object of apprehension. That would be the object of observation. And you perceive them as an inherently existent person. That would be the object of engagement. The object of observation is just what you're observing. How you engage that thing may be different.
But if for an I consciousness, for an I consciousness and the object of how can the object of engagement be the the inherent existence of whatever?
No, it can't
right?
be. No, it can't.
Right.
I'm just giving just explaining between. You said, is the object of observation the same as the object of engagement? Which some people that hadn't heard the talks on low rig might not understand what that means. So object of observation means the general object that you're observing. How you
Oh,
engage that object is not necessarily,
but wait, but for an eye consciousness, the object of engagement, what else? I mean, it's not. What else is it? I mean, whether in whatever it's engaging with or whether it's observing have to be the same, right? I mean, I understand.
Yes, but you said, is it, your question, I thought, was in general.
Oh, no, I meant for a particular consciousness. For a particular consciousness, is the object of observation and the object of engagement the same?
Generally, but not necessarily. Say, for instance, as I said, for instance, if your mental consciousness takes as its object of observation the 5 aggregates, but conceives it as being inherently existent self, that's its object of engagement. So it's not necessarily through all the consciousnesses. Eye consciousness may be the same. Maybe
so for a sense consciousness, it's going to be true, but not for the mental consciousness. That necessarily.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to me, let me just say, I mean, there's the appearing object. Is the appearing object the same as the object of observation? Because, I mean, I'm thinking about a conceptual consciousness.
Yeah, but the appearing object of a conceptual consciousness is going to be the meaning generality. That's not going
Well,
to.
I thought that the appearing object was the objects of apprehension.
So some of you will find the richness of this class is that some of us are beginners and some of us are old scholars who are debating the fine points. Let's leave that for a little bit later. Stephen, do you have a question?
I was just going to ask, is the object of observation the referent object?
That's another translation of Mikgyul. Yeah, object of observation. So in Tibetan, I think my lawnmower guy is calling anyway. Object of observation and referent object are 2 different ways of translating the same thing. It's the thing that you're referring to or observing. Okay.
And what is it in Tibetan? Migyul, you said?
Mikgyul, like Migyul, without the extra letters. Mik is actually spelled Dao, Magi Gumi Gasa Mik. Yul is Ya Shabjush Yu La Yul, Mikgyul. So when we the mantra of Lama Tsongkhapa, Mikme Sewe Ter Chen Chen Rezi, Mikme means, you could translate it as non-objectifying or non-referential. May is a negative particle. So Mik can be translated as observed or like observation or referent, that which you're referring to or observing. So let's just finish this. They have similar support, similar objects of observation, similar aspect. So the explanation that sense of mind is generated having an aspect, for instance, of blue, its mental factor is also generated in that aspect, blue. Their subjective aspects are similar, or you could say same. They have 5 similarities or 5 samenesses. Okay. They are similar in time. And here the explanation is that sense of mind and its mental factors are simultaneous in regard to the 3: production, abiding, and cessation. Their times are similar or same, or you could say their durations are the same. The mental factor doesn't, once the main mind is no longer observing something, experiencing something, the mental factors also have ceased observing that. It's not like they could last longer than the primary consciousness. and then similar substance. Just as minds of similar type are distinct substances, likewise, mental factors such as feelings of a similar type are also distinct substances therefore their substances are similar. Just as minds of a similar type are distinct substances, likewise, mental factors such as feelings of a similar type are also distinct substances, therefore their substances are similar. So I think this could be summarized as that they have the same substance. They are not, you can't separate one from the other. So I've already reached the end of the extended, which Shanka had asked me to not go over 2 hours. So I'm going to stop there. And Doris, you have this, some people have some questions. So Doris.
I was wondering, the reference there to observed object, could it be in the could it be in the context of the 3 conditions for a consciousness? Like the observed object, the uncommon, or like the dominant condition, and the preceding moment. Could it mean it in that context?
There's a similarity there because we talk about the observed object condition, but that is not necessarily the same as the observed object. The observed object condition generally is the observed object. That is to say, when any consciousness arises, there have to be 2 conditions for the consciousness to arise, right? Mark, do you know this?
No.
No. So there has to be a faculty. Let's say if we're talking about I consciousness, there has to be a faculty that acts as an interface between consciousness, our subjective consciousness, and the objects that it's knowing. That would be the I faculty in the case of I consciousness. There has to be a uncommon empowering condition, it's called. That's the I faculty. There has to be an observed object condition, some object that it's observing. Observe doesn't necessarily be with the eye. It could be observing with the ear, with the nose, with the tongue, with the tactile consciousness, or with the mental consciousness. And there has to be a previously how can I stop that? There we go. There has to be a previously existing consciousness that acts as its continuity. So in I consciousness, it's generally a previous moment of consciousness that gives rise to the next moment of I consciousness. It can be mental consciousness also. So there are 3 kinds of conditions that give rise to that. Maybe another question. Anyone else have another question? You're all satiated or saturated with information. So my suggestion next time to read further through this section and up through the section of the 5 omnipresent mental factors. And note your question, if you, as you're reading and after you've read it and you thought about it, if you have questions, we can address them next time. And in your discussion group now, if Bob or Shankar, whoever's leading discussion, doesn't, if you can't come to some common consensus about understanding, we can address those next time also. So we'll end here with a quick dedication. Try to withdraw your consciousness back to your mental consciousness. See if you can recollect the clear light nature of your mind. remembering consciousness. And within that calm state of mind, recall that due to our motivation at the beginning, we've created some virtuous karma. Also due to the simultaneous motivations, not just the impetus at the beginning motivating, but the motivations that arose during listening, we created virtuous karma, hopefully. That karma will necessarily ripen within cyclic existence as something pleasurable, something beneficial, so as not to let that ripen in the future in some one-time gratifying samsaric experience, but to dedicate it to act as the substance of our future realizations up to and including enlightenment. Think, due to these merits, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead each and every sentient being as a result of that, lead each and every sentient being to that very same state. Thank you very much. Thanks for your patience, and hope to see you next week. And if there are any people who've missed, you can tell them that should be up maybe by Monday or so on YouTube, I suspect. And hope to see you next week.
Thank you.